I wasn't even supposed to be on the app that day. I'd deleted Grindr months ago, Hinge was a wasteland, and Tinder had become this graveyard of ghosted conversations and guys who only wanted one thing. But it was a rainy Thursday night, I was tipsy off 2 glasses of wine, and loneliness does this thing where suddenly re-downloading a dating app feels like the most logical decision in the world. So I did it. Reinstalled Bumble, updated my photos, wrote something dumb like teacher by day, blanket burrito by night, and started swiping. Left, left, hard left, right, left again. And then I stopped. His face was warm in a way that caught me off guard. He had that kind of smile that felt unpracticed, like it showed up when he wasn't trying. Brown eyes, little squint lines in the corners, a faded jean jacket, slight stubble. His name was Eli. There was something so familiar about him. I stared at his profile like it owed me an answer. Eli, 28, graphic designer, fluent in sarcasm and iced coffee. Bonus points if you love dogs and can beat me at Mario Kart. That smile. That name. I didn't know where I knew him from, but I was sure I did. I swiped right. Instant match. Eli, you again? Wait. You again? Me. Wait again? Eli. Lamau, I was joking. But you do look really familiar. That made my stomach do a little flip. Me. Okay, thank you. I was literally thinking the same thing. Eli. Like, I was scrolling, saw your face, and had this weird deja vu moment. Do you live around Logan Square? Me. Yeah, a couple blocks from the Blue Line. Why? Eli. Huh. I used to bartend at Lenny's on Milwaukee. Did we meet there? Me. No, but I've definitely been. Maybe you just gave me a drink once? Eli. Maybe you gave me a hangover once. I laughed. We messaged for an hour. He was smart, sarcastic in a way that felt flirty, and not once did he ask what I was into at 2 a.m. It felt easy, like we were picking up a conversation that had already started. And yet the more we talked, the more that weird familiarity gnawed at me. It wasn't the bar. It wasn't college. We'd already ruled that out. It wasn't mutual friends. But I knew this guy. Then it hit me. The photo. In one of his pics, he was holding a golden retriever in a park I knew, Humboldt Park, near the lagoon. But that wasn't it. It was his hoodie. I know, it sounds stupid, but I'd seen that hoodie before. I clicked on his profile again, staring at the photo. It was this beat-up gray zip-up with a faded Cubs logo on the chest and one of those yellow wristbands from some charity walk. And just like that, my brain filled in the blanks. Freshman year. University of Illinois. He lived 1 floor above me in the dorms. We weren't friends, not really. But we had a psych lecture together. I remember him because he used to come in late every Tuesday, drop into the back row, and immediately open a pack of sour gummy worms like it was tradition. We spoke once, maybe twice. I think I borrowed a pen from him during midterms. And then, I guess he disappeared into the mess of college faces and time. Me. Okay, this might be weird, but did you go to U of I? Eli. I did. You too? Me. Did you take Psych 101 with Wexler? Eli. OMG. LMAO. Yes. Tuesday morning. Absolutely brutal. Me. You used to sit in the back. Gummy worms. Eli. Wait. There was a long pause. Eli. You're the guy who borrowed my pen that one time. You had a blue hoodie with the torn sleeve. My jaw literally dropped. I hadn't worn that hoodie in years. Me. Dude. Holy shit. Eli. This is insane. I knew you. You had that sleepy look every lecture like you were gonna pass out. Me. You were the one always late and unapologetic. Eli. Sounds like me. It was crazy. And yet it wasn't. It made sense in a weird full circle way. We kept talking that night until 2 a.m., and by the end of the conversation we had plans for Saturday. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what that first date brought up. Because sometimes people from your past don't just remind you of who you were. They show you who you've become. Saturday came faster than I expected. I spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear, like I was 18 again, and trying to look effortlessly hot without looking like I'd tried it all. I changed shirts 3 times, debated jackets, then ended up going with a black hoodie and jeans, the safest possible version of myself. Familiar, comfortable, probably very on-brand considering the circumstances. We agreed to meet at a small coffee and cocktails place halfway between our apartments. Casual enough that it didn't scream date, but intimate enough that it definitely was one. I got there first. The place smelled like espresso and citrus peel, low music humming through the speakers. I picked a table near the window, mostly so I could see him before he saw me. My hands were already sweating, which annoyed me. This wasn't some stranger. This was just Eli, the guy from psych class, the gummy worms guy. Still, my heart was pounding. Then the door opened. I recognized him instantly, not just because of his face, but because of the way he paused just inside, scanning the room with that same slightly distracted look he'd had in lectures years ago. Like he was always half a thought behind the present moment. When his eyes landed on me, his face lit up. That smile again. The same one from the app. The same one from college, just older, more settled. "Holy shit," he said as he walked over. "You're real." I stood up, suddenly aware of how close he was. Taller than I remembered. Broader shoulders. Same eyes. "So are you," I said, and immediately hated how stupid that sounded. He laughed though. Warm, genuine. We hugged. It wasn't awkward. That was the weirdest part. It wasn't that stiff, polite first date hug where both of you are already planning the exit strategy. It felt familiar. Like greeting someone you hadn't seen in years, but somehow hadn't stopped knowing. "Wow," he said as we pulled back, still smiling. "You look good. So do you," I said, because he did, and because I wanted him to know. We ordered drinks, coffee for him, something with gin for me, and sat down. For a second, there was this quiet between us, not uncomfortable exactly, just loaded. Like we were both thinking the same thing and waiting to see who'd say it first. "I can't believe we matched," he finally said. "Out of everyone in this city." Yeah, I agreed, and that we didn't realize it right away. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. Not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to line up memories with reality. "I remember you being really quiet," he said. "Not in a bad way, just observant, like you were always listening." I smiled a little. "I remember you always smelled like sour candy," he groaned. "God, that tracks." We laughed, and something in my chest loosened. Conversation flowed easily after that. We talked about college, about how weird it was that we'd been in the same orbit back then, without ever really crossing paths. He told me he'd dropped out for a year, moved back home, then transferred. I told him about how lost I'd been after graduation, how teaching wasn't something I'd planned but somehow fell into. At one point he said, "Can I tell you something kind of embarrassing?" "Please do," I said. "I live for that." He hesitated, then shrugged. "I had a crush on you." I nearly choked on my drink. "You did not." "I did," he insisted. "Not like a big dramatic one, but I definitely noticed you." "When?" I asked, genuinely stunned. "Midterms week," he said. "You were sitting outside the lecture hall, flipping through notes. You looked exhausted. I almost offered you gummy worms." I laughed, shaking my head. "I would have panicked." He smiled. "Yeah, I figured." My chest felt tight in the best way. "Can I tell you something embarrassing?" I asked. He nodded. "I thought you were straight." He blinked, then laughed. "Fair." "Seriously," I said. "You had that energy, confident, unbothered. I never even considered." "I was deeply closeted," he said simply. "Didn't come out until I was 24. That surprised me, not because it didn't make sense, but because I recognized that version of myself too. "Same," I said quietly. We sat with that for a moment. There was a shift then. Something unspoken, but clear. We weren't just reminiscing anymore. We were acknowledging the parallel lives we'd lived without knowing it. The ways we'd both been hiding, passing each other in hallways without realizing how much we had in common. At some point, our knees touched under the table. Neither of us moved away. "I'm really glad we matched," he said softly. "Me too," I replied. When we finally stood up to leave, neither of us reached for our phones. No awkward, "We should do this again sometime." It was already understood. Outside, the air was cool, the streetlights casting everything in soft yellow. We stood there for a second, neither of us ready to go. "So," he said, "do you want to walk for a bit?" I nodded. We walked. Past quiet storefronts, past old brick buildings. Talking about nothing and everything. And when he finally stopped, turning toward me, I knew. He hesitated, just for a second. Then leaned in. The kiss was gentle, slow, careful in the way first kisses are when they actually mean something. His hand brushed my arm, warm and grounding. When we pulled back, he smiled like he was a little stunned. "Wow," he said again. "Yeah," I breathed. As I walked home later that night, my phone buzzed. "Eli, I keep thinking about how close we were back then and didn't even know it." I typed back without hesitation. Me, "Maybe we just weren't ready yet." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, Eli, "I think we are now." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. I didn't expect him to become part of my routine so quickly. But suddenly, he was everywhere. Sunday morning coffee turned into our coffee. Wednesday nights became trivia nights. He started texting me pictures of dogs he passed on the street with captions like, "Thought of you," even though I'd never once said I was a dog person. I let him believe it anyway. What surprised me most wasn't how easy it was how natural. Like our lives had already learned how to orbit each other, back in college, and we're just picking that motion back up now, years later. The familiarity didn't fade with time. If anything, it deepened. One night, about 2 weeks after our first date, we were sprawled on my couch. The windows were cracked open, letting in the late summer air and the hum of the city below. We weren't watching the movie anymore. Something mindless was playing in the background, but neither of us had bothered to turn it off. Eli was leaning back against the armrest, one leg stretched out, the other bent. I was lying sideways, my head resting against his thigh. That alone felt significant, intimate in a quiet way, the kind of closeness that sneaks up on you. "You ever think about how weird timing is?" he asked. "Constantly," I said. "It's basically my brand." He smiled down at me, fingers absently brushing through my hair. The touch made my chest tighten, not in a nervous way, in a "this is dangerous" way, the good kind. "I mean," he continued, "if we'd actually talked back then, we probably wouldn't be here now." I thought about that. College me, closeted, anxious, convinced every feeling had to be buried or explained away. Him, probably doing the same thing in his own way. "Yeah," I said, "we would have ruined it." He laughed softly. "Yeah, we would have." There was a pause, the kind where you can feel something waiting to be said. "I remember you," he said suddenly. "More than I realized." I shifted, sitting up slightly so I could look at him. "What do you mean?" "There was this night," he said slowly. "End of sophomore year. Everyone was drinking. I was sitting on the steps outside the dorm, just trying to breathe for a second. I froze. I remember someone sat next to me," he continued. "Didn't say anything for a while. Just sat." My heart started pounding. "That was you, wasn't it?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "You asked me if I was okay," he said. I said yeah, obviously lying. "You didn't push, just said, 'Cool, let me know if you need company.'" I swallowed. I remembered that night. I remembered thinking he looked lonely. I remembered wanting to stay longer and not knowing how. "I didn't realize it mattered to you," I said. "It did," he replied. "A lot. I think about it sometimes, about how safe that felt. Something shifted then. Not dramatically, just deeper." He reached for my hand, lacing our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. And maybe it was. A few days later, he invited me over to his place. It was small, warm, filled with plants that were somehow still alive despite his frequent travel for work. His walls were covered in prints, half-finished designs, old concert posters, a couple of framed sketches that made my chest ache a little. "You drew these?" I asked, gesturing. "Yeah," he said. "Back in college, mostly. I stopped for a while." "Why?" he shrugged. "Life. Fear. The usual." I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to admit. Later, we ended up on his bed, fully clothed, lying on our backs, staring at the ceiling. The room smelled faintly like laundry detergent and something citrusy, comforting. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Always," I replied. "Back then, were you lonely?" The question hit harder than I expected. "Yeah," I admitted. "I was. I didn't know how not to be." He turned his head toward me. "Me too." We didn't kiss that night. Not because we didn't want to, but because something about it felt sacred. Like we were still unfolding something fragile and real, and neither of us wanted to rush it. Instead, he pulled me into his chest, arms wrapped around me, and we fell asleep like that. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight spilling across the room, his arm was still around me, his breathing slow and steady. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waking up alone. Even when I had someone beside me, I felt known. And as I lay there, listening to his heartbeat, I realized something else too. This wasn't just a coincidence, or a cute story about timing and dating apps. This was about two versions of ourselves finally meeting at the right moment. And I had a feeling the hardest part was still ahead. The first time we fought, it caught me off guard. Not because it was explosive or dramatic, but because it was so quiet. It happened on a Tuesday night, the kind of night that usually belonged to us. I'd just finished grading essays, my brain fried from reading the same sentence structure 27 different ways. Eli was already at my place, sitting at the kitchen counter with a beer, scrolling on his phone. "You okay?" he asked, glancing up. "Yeah," I said automatically. Too automatically. He studied me for a second. "That didn't sound like a yeah." I sighed and leaned against the counter across from him. "Just tired. Work stuff." He nodded, but something in his expression shifted, like he wanted to say more but wasn't sure how. We moved to the couch later, legs tangled, the TV on low. He kissed my temple absent-mindedly, thumb tracing slow circles on my arm. Normally, that would have grounded me instantly. That night, it didn't. "So," he said casually, "my ex texted me today." My body stiffened before I could stop it. "Oh," I replied. "Okay," he noticed. Of course he did. "Not like that. He's moving to Seattle. Just wanted closure, I guess." I nodded, staring at the TV. My chest felt tight, and I hated myself for it. I didn't want to be that guy, the jealous one, the insecure one. But something old stirred in me, something familiar. "Did you reply?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. Just wished him well. Silence stretched between us. "You mad?" he asked gently. "No," I said too quickly, then corrected myself. No, I just wasn't expecting that." He turned toward me fully. "Hey, talk to me." And that's when it happened. The thing I hadn't planned to say. "I keep waiting for you to realize you already knew me and decide I'm not enough anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Eli didn't react right away. He didn't laugh it off or get defensive. He just looked at me. Really looked at me. "Where did that come from?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. "From college. From being invisible. From watching people choose someone louder, bolder, easier." He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back without meaning to. "I spent so many years being I continued. Almost noticed. Almost chosen. And now suddenly, I'm here, with you. And it feels too good. Like something's going to take it away. He exhaled slowly, nodding. Okay. That response surprised me. Okay? Yeah, he said. Okay, that makes sense. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw something raw in his eyes too. You know what I was afraid of, he said? That you'd realize you remembered me as the confident guy from college, and then notice all the ways I'm still a mess. I blinked. I didn't come out until my mid-20s, he continued. I dated guys who treated me like I was temporary. I stayed in jobs I hated because I didn't think I deserved better. He laughed softly, without humor. You weren't the only one who felt invisible. Something in my chest cracked open. I'm not talking to my ex because I miss him, he said. I'm talking to him because I finally don't. I let that sink in. I'm here, he added, with you, not because of timing or coincidence or some dating app glitch, because I choose you. My throat burned. I don't need you to be fearless, he said. Just honest, even when it's messy. I nodded, tears threatening but not falling. I can do that. He pulled me into his chest then, firm and grounding. And for the first time since we'd matched, I let myself fully lean into him. Later that night, after the tension had softened into something quieter, we lay in bed talking about stupid things. Bad haircuts, worse dates, the weird freedom of being seen as an adult instead of a potential. At one point, he traced the inside of my wrist with his thumb and said, You know what's wild? What? I think we needed to be strangers first. I smiled into the darkness. Yeah, I think so too. The next morning, he left early for work. I watched him from the doorway as he pulled on his jacket, tying his shoes. I'll see you tonight? He asked. Yeah, I said. Tonight. When the door closed, I stood there longer than necessary, listening to the echo fade. I wasn't scared the same way I used to be. But I was aware now. Aware that love wasn't just about rediscovery or timing. It was about staying. About choosing each other even when old fears resurfaced. And deep down, I knew something else too. We weren't just rewriting the past. We were building something that hadn't existed before. Something real. After that night, something settled between us. Not in the dramatic, fireworks kind of way, but in the quiet way that sneaks up on you while you're not paying attention. The way you suddenly realize there's an extra toothbrush by the sink, and it doesn't feel intrusive. The way you start buying groceries with someone else's preferences in mind without even thinking about it. Eli started staying over more often. Sometimes it was planned. Sometimes it just happened. One beer turned into 2, one episode turned into 3, and suddenly it was easier to sleep next to each other than apart. What surprised me most was how domestic it all felt. One Sunday morning, I woke up to the sound of him moving around my kitchen. Cabinets opening. The soft clink of ceramic. The smell of coffee drifting down the hallway. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, listening. That old instinct to brace myself, to prepare for disappointment, flickered, then faded. When I finally shuffled out in sweatpants and a t-shirt, he was leaning against the counter, hair messy, holding 2 mugs. You take it black, right? He asked. I nodded, suddenly unable to speak. He handed me the mug like he'd done it 100 times before. Like, this was normal. Like we were normal. You okay? He asked, noticing my expression. Yeah, I said. Just, this is nice. He smiled. Yeah, it is. We spent that day doing absolutely nothing productive. Groceries, laundry, a walk around the neighborhood. At one point, we passed the old campus shuttle stop by the park. He stopped, staring at it like it had personally offended him. I used to wait here after psych, he said. Every week. I laughed. I used to pretend I wasn't watching you be late. He grinned. I knew it. Later, as we sat on a bench nearby, He nudged my shoulder. You know what I regret? What? Not asking you out back then, I shrugged. You would have scared me. Fair, he admitted. Still, I wonder sometimes how different things would have been. I thought about that. About all the versions of myself that had existed since then. The scared one, the lonely one, the one who'd learned to protect himself by not wanting too much. I don't think I would have been ready, I said honestly. Not for this, he nodded. Me neither. That night, things shifted again. Not emotionally. We were already there. But physically. Slowly. Naturally. Like a conversation that had been building for weeks finally reaching its point. We were in my bedroom, lights low, the city humming faintly outside. His hands were warm, steady. Mine were shaking just a little. Not from nerves, but from awareness. From how much it meant. He kissed me like he was asking permission every step of the way, like he was listening. Afterward, we lay tangled together, breath slowing, skin cooling. Hey, he murmured. Can I tell you something without it being weird? I smiled against his chest. You're terrible at asking that, he laughed softly. I think I've been falling for you for longer than we've known. I swallowed. My chest felt full in a way that almost hurt. I think I have too, I admitted. I just didn't know what to call it back then. Silence settled. Not awkward. Comfortable. Over the next few weeks, reality crept in the way it always does. Work stress, missed calls, bad days. But instead of pulling away, we leaned in. When I had a rough parent-teacher conference, he showed up with takeout and didn't ask me to explain. When he had a deadline that wrecked his sleep schedule, I stayed up with him, grading papers beside his laptop. One night, lying in bed, he said, "Do you ever worry we're just filling a gap?" I turned toward him. What kind of gap? Loneliness, timing, nostalgia. I thought about it, about how easy it would have been to dismiss us as coincidence. No, I said finally. I think we're building something new. It just happens to have old roots. He smiled, brushing his thumb along my jaw. I like that. The first time he called me his boyfriend, it wasn't planned. We were at a bar with some of his friends. Someone asked how we met. He said, "We matched on a dating app. Turns out we already knew each other." Then, without missing a beat, "This is my boyfriend." The word hit me like a quiet explosion. Later, walking home, I teased him. "Boyfriend, huh?" He glanced at me, suddenly serious. "Too soon?" "No," I said quickly. "Just new." He squeezed my hand. "Good new?" "The best," I said. As we climbed the stairs to my place, I realized something. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for loss or disappointment or being forgotten. I was here, and so was he. And somehow, after all those years of almosts and maybes, that felt like enough. The first time I realized I loved him wasn't during a kiss or a late-night confession. It was during a grocery run. We were standing in the cereal aisle of the neighborhood store, arguing, genuinely arguing, about whether Honey Nut Cheerios counted as a dessert cereal. Eli had a box tucked under his arm like it was a personal moral stance. "It has honey in the name," he said. "That's basically candy." "That's a reach," I replied. "You can't call every sweet thing candy." "Yes, I can," he said confidently. "Watch me." I laughed, shaking my head, and in that moment, standing there with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a cart with exactly 3 usable wheels, and a man I'd once barely known holding cereal like it was a legal brief, I felt it, this quiet certainty, not the dizzy, heart-racing, crush kind of love, the grounded, "oh, you're my person" kind. The realization scared me more than I expected. I didn't say anything right away. I didn't want to rush it or turn it into a performance. Part of me was afraid that if I named it too soon, it might evaporate. Like a dream you talk about out loud and then suddenly can't remember anymore. Instead, I showed it in smaller ways. I started making room for him in my life without questioning it, inviting him to things that used to be just mine, letting him see me on days when I wasn't charming or easy to love, trusting him with the boring parts of me. One night, about a month later, he came over after a rough day. He didn't say much at first, just kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the couch beside me. "You don't have to entertain me," I said softly. "Good," he replied, "because I don't have it in me." So we didn't talk. We just sat there, his head on my shoulder, my arm around him, the TV playing something neither of us was watching. I felt him relax gradually, like his body finally believed it was safe. "Can I ask you something?" he murmured after a while. "Yeah. Do you ever feel like you're still trying to prove you deserve good things?" The question hit me right in the chest. "Yeah," I admitted. "All the time," he nodded. "Me too." He shifted slightly, turning his face toward mine. "I don't want to feel like that with you." I swallowed. "You don't have to." "Promise?" he asked quietly. "I promise," I said, and meant it. A few weeks later, he invited me to a small gathering with some of his closest friends. Nothing big, just drinks at someone's apartment, but it felt significant, like a threshold. I watched him across the room that night, laughing, relaxed, entirely himself. At one point, he caught me looking and raised his eyebrows in a silent question. "You okay?" I nodded. "More than okay." Later, as we walked home, he laced his fingers through mine and said, "They like you." "That's a relief," I said. "I was trying very hard to be charming." He smiled. "You don't have to try." That's when it happened. "I love you," I said. The words were out before I could second-guess them. He stopped walking. For half a second, panic flared. Sharp and familiar. The old fear that I'd misjudged the moment, that I'd gone too far. Then his face softened. "Hey," he said gently. "Come here." He pulled me into him, forehead resting against mine. "I love you too." The world didn't explode. There were no fireworks or swelling music, just the quiet hum of the city and the steady rhythm of his breathing. And somehow, that felt perfect. We didn't rush anything after that. We didn't suddenly start talking about moving in or forever plans. We just continued, a little more honest, a little more sure. But life, as always, had other ideas. A month later, he told me about the job offer. "It's in Seattle," he said carefully, watching my face. 6 months. Maybe more. My chest tightened, not with jealousy or fear, but with the weight of reality. "Oh," I said. "Wow. I haven't said yes," he added quickly. "Not yet." We sat in silence, the kind that presses on you. "I don't want this to end," he said finally. "Me neither," I replied. But we both knew that love doesn't pause the world. It just asks you to decide how much you're willing to risk. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while he slept beside me. I thought about timing, about how it had finally brought us together, only to test us again. I turned toward him, brushing my thumb along his shoulder. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was a choice. And soon, we'd have to make it. We didn't make the decision right away. For a while, the job offer just existed between us, like a third presence in the room. Not spoken about directly, but always there. In the pauses. In the way Eli would stare out the window a little longer than usual. In the way I started memorizing things about him without meaning to, how he folded his shirts, how he hummed when he brushed his teeth, the exact rhythm of his breathing when he fell asleep. 6 months wasn't forever, but it wasn't nothing either. "I don't want you to feel like you have to choose me over your life," I said one night, even though the words tasted bitter. He looked at me carefully. "I don't want to feel like choosing my life means losing you." That was the truth of it. Clean. Uncomfortable. In the end, he took the job. Not because I pushed him. Not because he wanted distance. But because sometimes the bravest thing you can do for a relationship is refuse to let it become the reason you shrink yourself. The week before he left felt unreal. like we were moving through water. Everything became charged with meaning. Grocery trips, dishes, even silence. We didn't fight. We were too careful for that, too aware that time was limited. The night before his flight, we stayed in. No distractions. No pretending it was just another night. We cooked dinner together, moved around each other in that easy way that comes from knowing someone's body in a space. At one point, he reached for a spice behind me and kissed the side of my neck without thinking. That small, absent gesture nearly undid me. Later, lying in bed, his head on my chest, he traced idle shapes on my skin. "I hate this part," he murmured. "Which part?" I asked, though I already knew. "The part where we have to be strong." I closed my eyes. Me too. We didn't make big promises, no dramatic vows about waiting forever or closing the distance at all costs. We just agreed to try, to stay honest, to not disappear when things got hard. At the airport the next morning, everything felt too bright, too loud. We hugged longer than necessary. People moved around us. Lives continuing like this wasn't a fracture point. "I'll call you when I land," he said. "I know," I replied. He kissed me, soft, lingering, and then he was gone. The first week without him was the worst. Not because I was lonely, I was, but because I kept expecting him to be there. I'd reach for my phone to text him something stupid, then remember the time difference. I'd roll over in bed and feel the empty space like a physical ache. We talked every day, sometimes long conversations, sometimes just voice notes. He sent me pictures of the rain-soaked streets in Seattle, of his temporary apartment, of the view from his office window. I sent him pictures of nothing. My coffee, my commute, my attempts at cooking for one. At night, I replayed memories I hadn't known would matter so much. The cereal aisle. The way he said my name when he was half asleep. That first kiss outside the bar. Distance has a way of making you confront things you can usually avoid. One night, after a particularly hard day, I almost didn't answer his call. I was tired, drained, afraid that hearing his voice would make the missing worse. But I did. "You okay?" he asked immediately. I exhaled. "I'm trying to be." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "You don't have to be all the time." Something in his voice, steady, present even from 1,000 miles away, grounded me. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not of losing you, of what happens when this becomes our normal." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think normal is just something we get used to. It doesn't mean it's permanent." Weeks passed, then months. We settled into a rhythm, found ways to show up for each other across the distance. Movie nights on FaceTime, falling asleep on the phone, talking through fights instead of letting them fester. It wasn't easy, but it was real. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I realized something. Matching on that app hadn't been the miracle. Staying, choosing to keep showing up even when it was inconvenient, uncomfortable, uncertain, that was the miracle. One night, 3 months in, he said, "I think I want to come home when this is over." I didn't ask him what he meant by home. I already knew. The day Eli came back, it didn't feel cinematic. No slow-motion airport run. No swelling music. No dramatic confession in a crowded terminal. It was raining. Of course it was. I stood under the awning, outside the arrivals area, hood pulled up, hands shoved into my pockets. I'd checked the flight status so many times I could have recited it from memory. Landed. Taxiing. Gate B-17. When I finally saw him walking toward me, hoodie, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair damp from the drizzle, I forgot how to breathe. He looked tired. Older, somehow. But his eyes lit up the second he spotted me. And that smile, undid every long night, every missed call, every ache I'd swallowed down over the past 6 months. "Hey," he said, stopping in front of me like he wasn't sure what came next. "Hey," I replied, voice rougher than I expected. We just stood there for a second. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me, pulling me in close. The hug was tighter than usual, like he was anchoring himself, like he needed to feel that I was real. "I'm home," he murmured into my shoulder. I closed my eyes. Yeah, you are. The adjustment period wasn't instant. We didn't snap back into the rhythm we'd had before he left. We were different now. More honest, maybe? A little more careful. Distance had stripped us down to the essentials, and now we had to rebuild with intention. There were moments of friction, small misunderstandings, a night where we argued about nothing and everything, both of us tired and raw. "I'm not going anywhere," he said during one of those moments, frustration edging his voice. "You don't have to keep bracing for that." I nodded, even though unlearning fear is never immediate. But then there were moments that felt like answers. Like the first time we grocery shopped together again, automatically reaching for each other's staples. Or the night we fell asleep on the couch halfway through a movie, limbs tangled, the city quiet outside. Or the morning he made coffee and handed me a mug without asking how I took it, because he knew. One evening, about a month after he was back, we were sitting on my balcony, wrapped in blankets, the air crisp. The city lights flickered below us. "Do you ever think about that app?" he asked suddenly. I laughed softly. "Sometimes, mostly when it sends me a notification like, 'You've got potential matches,'" he snorted. Same. He grew quiet, staring out over the railing. "You know," he said, "if we hadn't matched, I don't think we ever would have found our way back to each other." I thought about that, about all the near misses, the timing, the years we'd lived parallel lives without realizing how close we were. "Maybe," I said, "or maybe we just needed a different doorway." He turned toward me. "I'm glad it was that one." I hesitated, then said the thing that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. "I don't want to do this halfway anymore." His brow furrowed slightly. "What do you mean?" I mean, I don't want us to keep treating this like something fragile we're afraid to name too loudly," I said. "I want to build a life with you. Not someday, not hypothetically. Here." The silence stretched, but it wasn't tense. He smiled, slow and certain. "I was hoping you'd say that," he admitted. "I've been scared to be the first one to want more." I laughed softly. Figures. We didn't move in together right away. We talked about it, thought it through. Did it like adults who'd learned the hard way that love doesn't need to be rushed, but it does need to be chosen. When we finally did combine our lives, it wasn't dramatic. Just boxes, shared closet space, a growing collection of mismatched mugs. One night, months later, we were lying in bed, the room dark, except for streetlight glow filtering through the curtains. Eli was half asleep, arm heavy around my waist. "You know what's wild?" he murmured. "What?" "We spent years knowing each other without knowing each other." I turned slightly, pressing my forehead against his shoulder. "Yeah, and somehow," he added, "we still found our way here." I smiled into the darkness. Dating apps are weird, random, messy, full of almosts. But sometimes, once in a while, they don't just introduce you to someone new, they reintroduce you to someone you were always meant to meet again. And this time, we were ready.